I've been looking out the window every morning as I sip my coffee and have noticed a man who walks his dog every morning at the same hour with the same reliability as the kettle on my stove. You could set your clock by him. He walks down the sidewalk in the exact same fleece jacket he's probably been wearing for years, carrying the same travel mug that has probably seen more sunrises than most of us. The dog is a little terrier mix, I think, with eyebrows that seem permanently locked in a state of mild concern, the kind of expression that makes you wonder if he lies awake at night worrying about any of the same things as humans do. My neighbor, on the other hand, has the unmistakable stride of a man who's folded himself neatly into the rhythm of adulthood. There's a confidence in the way he moves, as if he's at that point in life where the day already knows what it expects of him. You can tell he's done this walk so many times that the muscles in his legs probably know the route better than he does. One morning recently, I watched him step out into the crisp air, leash in one hand, mug in the other, already leaning into the path he takes every single day. The whole scene had that predictable comfort you feel when you see the same cereal box in your pantry year after year after year. Just a man, his dog, and a routine holding hands. Except on this day, the dog had other plans. The terrier spotted something. An animal, a leaf, or possibly a message from the beyond. It's hard to say. But whatever it was, it lit him up like someone had plugged him into a socket. In one sudden burst of enthusiasm, he launched himself sideways into the bushes with the kind of wholehearted joy only creatures who've never paid property taxes can muster. The leash jerked, the travel mug tilted like a ship in rough waters. My neighbor stopped in his tracks, eyes wide, coffee sloshing perilously close to the rim. For a heartbeat, he looked like a man who had been gently shoved out of the familiar universe of grown-up responsibility and into a slightly absurd alternate dimension. You could almost hear the thought forming in his mind, the same thought adults everywhere whisper when chaos interrupts their order. You cannot be serious. There's a way we do things. But the dog obviously didn't share that philosophy. The dog had remembered something that my neighbor, and truthfully most of us living our respectable adult lives, tend to forget. Play is allowed. Doing something spontaneous, just for the fun of it, is actually okay. Even in the middle of our routines. Even when we're trying to look composed. And especially when the calendar says Tuesday and the grown-up in us says we should behave. I sat there, perched in my viewpoint, blanket pulled up to my chin, watching this tiny rebellion unfold, and I felt that familiar tug of recognition. It was one of those moments where life kind of holds up a mirror, because actually, this is exactly what happens to many of us. Not only in business, but in the roles we take on as adults. We get very practiced at doing things the right way, the efficient way, or the socially acceptable way. We follow the steps, keep the lists, keep the peace, do our best to be responsible citizens of the world. And somewhere in all that competence, something sparkly gets lost. You know, the universe never once asked us to take ourselves quite so seriously. I think we simply forget sometimes that creation can feel like play. Maybe we forgot that being playful doesn't mean we're not responsible. Really, play is often the thing that brings life back into everything we're responsible for. This episode is that remembering. Welcome to the Inspiritude Effect, the podcast where spirit meets story and dreams really do come true. I'm your host, Kathy Sherwood. And around here, we talk about transformation in every form. Spiritual nudges, reinventions, purpose, money, relationships, and everything to help make a fantastic life. Sometimes it's just me. Sometimes we bring in guests and co-hosts with their own kind of magic. but every time, it's a place to come back to yourself. So let's begin. If you think about it, most of us don't lose our sense of play in one fell swoop. It's not as if we wake up one morning, stretch, sigh, and say, well, that's enough joy for this lifetime. Time to do some serious adulting. It happens slowly, the way snow accumulates on a rooftop, or the way socks disappear from the dryer. One day you're chasing bubbles in the yard with your kids, or laughing at the dog's ridiculous antics, and then somehow you find yourself gravitating toward the steady rhythm of grocery lists, appointments, spreadsheets, commutes, and the eternal question of what to make for dinner. Life shapes itself around routines, and then all of a sudden, the routines are running the show, and you're left wondering when you became the person who has a drawer full of Tupperware lids but can't find a single matching container. Once the world begins to see you as responsible, you start behaving accordingly. You behave in the ways that seem sensible. You follow the advice of the people who appear to have it figured out. Of course, you nod along to guidance that sounds practical because that's what grown-ups are expected to do. You build the systems because that's what keeps things orderly. You take pride in knowing where the car keys are. You color code your calendar until it resembles a stained glass window in a small town chapel that only opens on Sundays. And for those who also decide to build something of your own, to call yourself a business owner, those creative edges tighten in ways you don't immediately notice. You may begin your business with a spark in your eyes and a flutter in your chest. There's huge excitement in the unknown and possibility in every idea. You feel inspired, probably a little wild, and ready to make something magical. Then comes the external chatter. You start listening to people who swear their system is the only system worth following. You take courses, you read books, and try to apply rules that someone else created. You optimize and streamline. You batch content like a well-oiled machine. You set up funnels and automations and tell yourself, this is what success looks like. Eventually, you become so competent, so organized, and so structured that even your spreadsheets seem to stand a little taller when you open them. I mean, sure, it's something to be proud of. All of this is understandable. You want things to work, right? You want to build something meaningful. You want to be the woman your friends point to and say, she's really going places. And for a time, that structure feels really supportive. It feels like it's progress. But then somewhere along the way, things kind of shift, and quite unnoticeably at first. A little thread of delight unravels without making a sound. You stop laughing quite as much. Not entirely, just enough that the universe tilts its head and notices the space where the giggle used to be. Your work becomes efficient, although maybe a little beige around the edges. The spark you began with softens into something paler, and the magic that used to show up so playfully now feels somewhat reluctant. Even your wins start to feel smaller, as if they shrink slightly on the journey from achievement to awareness. And one day you find yourself thinking, I need to get serious, with a weight on your chest that feels a bit like resignation. Yet seriousness has never once been the reason abundance arrived. Play has always been the current that carries creativity forward, and when that current slows, you feel the tug of something missing. This is where today's episode truly begins. In that subtle yet glaringly in-your-face moment when you realize you miss your magic. I'm going to tell you a story about pancakes. Years ago, when the kids were small and we lived in a little house that leaned ever so slightly to one side, I had one of those stretches of life where adulthood felt particularly heavy. The kind of week where you spend more time sorting through bills and permission slips than actually living your life. A week where everything seems to require a password or a login or signature, or just a level of emotional maturity I wasn't entirely sure I possessed. By the end of the week, I felt as though I had been squeezed into the shape of a responsible adult and left there to harden. My mind was crowded with to-dos and what-ifs, the kind that scream at you even before you've had your first cup of coffee. I remember standing in the kitchen thinking how much I longed for something to be easy, something small and satisfying that belonged to the world before everything became serious. So I reached for the mixing bowl. Pancakes felt doable, familiar, a tiny rebellion against the heaviness of the week. One kid perched on the counter, the other glued to my hip, both watching with wide-eyed interest as if I were doing something far more impressive than whisking flour and eggs. There was something comforting about the simple rhythm of stirring, the scent of vanilla rising, and the soft glow of morning light on the counter. And that was the moment when the universe decided to add its own twist to the morning. Chubby little fingers darted out with the speed of a tiny magician. They scooped up a blob of batter off the edge of the bowl and, with great pride and absolutely no warning, flung it onto the hot pan with a wet, satisfying plop. Everything froze for a little moment. Me, the kids. Even time seemed to pause, as though waiting to evaluate the situation. A dollop of pancake batter now sat on the sizzling pan, looking like something between an accident and an invitation. My little one beamed, enormously pleased. The other one, startled at the sudden breach in kitchen protocol, then settled into a glowing kind of excitement, the kind children feel when they realize order has taken a brief vacation and something unexpected might be taking its place. I stared at the blob, feeling that odd mixture of chaos and opportunity a parent knows well. And in that moment, I chose opportunity. I tilted my head, looked at the shape, and realized that with a few well-placed dribbles of batter, I could turn this mystery blob into something recognizable. So I leaned in, still balancing my kiddo on my hip, and added a curve here, a dot there, a swoop of batter in just the right place. The sizzling little creature began to look like a face, or a heart, or maybe a cat, depending on who you asked. The kids watched the whole thing with wide eyes, thrilled by the alchemy of it all. By the time it was ready to flip, both were arguing passionately about who it belonged to. It became, without question, the pancake of the morning, the favorite, the one they told their dad about when he got home from work. That moment gave me something better than the easy morning I'd been hoping for. I was shown that sometimes the best ideas arrive sideways, kind of lobbed into your life by tiny hands with sticky wrists. Sometimes the most inspired creation happens not because everything is under control, but because something knocked you off your plan and handed you a blob of possibility instead. You don't get moments like that when everything is rigid. You get them when you leave room for play. It reminds me of what happens everywhere in our grown-up lives, really, in our work, our relationships, really any place where we've traded wonder for control of the outcome. So many of us plateau, not because we're out of ideas or we're lacking skill. We plateau because somewhere along the way, we misplaced our play, our sense of fun. We traded curiosity for efficiency, or we swapped wonder for all the systems that we need to implement. We became responsible adults, successful entrepreneurs, great employees, marching the same route with the same mug and the same expression of quiet determination, forgetting that the whole point of creating anything is the freedom to wander off the path when something sparkly catches your eye. The people who end up expanding into their next level, the ones who grow in ways that feel magical instead of exhausting, are the ones who remember these simple truths. Wealth actually responds to play. Expansion, growth, responds to curiosity. And magic Well, that often responds to mischief. A life that grows bigger isn't built through effort alone. It grows through tiny moments where you follow a nudge that makes absolutely no sense and discover it leads you somewhere unexpected and quite often extraordinary. If you're someone who follows nudges the way other people follow recipes, you start to notice a rhythm to the whole thing. While many serious people consider play the opposite of responsibility, I believe it has its own kind of intelligence, like a compass with a sense of humor. It can be an invitation that sometimes arrives a little off center and never with a business plan attached. Some of the best decisions I've ever made didn't begin with logic. They began with a tug, a lift in the chest, like a flicker of curiosity that had no obvious place in the adult world I was supposed to maintain. Grown-up me, whoever that actually is, would have said, now isn't the time, or this isn't the plan. Creative me leaned in anyway, and that's usually where the magic starts, when a small spark comes out of nowhere and changes the whole feeling of a room. So here's your invitation today. Find a place, any place, where you can let a little play slip back in. It doesn't have to be the big kind, not the sell all your belongings and move to Bali kind, although I can highly recommend that if that's your jam. But for now, just start with the small, friendly sort of play that fits in the corners of your day. Let yourself follow one nudge that feels a little bit too silly to justify on paper. Doodle in the margins. Take the long way home because the light looks nice. Stir the batter a little messier than necessary and see what happens next. Add a spark back into whatever part of your life has started to sound like a to-do list being read out loud. Make a pancake shaped like a dinosaur and call it a masterpiece. Let your metaphorical terrier tug you off the usual path for no good reason. Give yourself permission to wander just for the fun of it. Because the version of you who expands into their next chapter is not the one who tightens her jaw and pushes harder. She's the one who remembers she once knew how to play. She's the one who notices an idea arriving like a knock on the door and says, well, that could be interesting. She's the one who co-creates with the universe, the way kids co-create games in the backyard, with rules that shift and a grin that grows with every new possibility. Success, wealth, abundance of any kind really, doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from the frequency you hold while you're living your life. It comes from curiosity, delight, and the courage to follow the nudges that make no sense until they do. I've never seen abundance respond well to being chased down or tightly managed. It tends to lean in closer when there's room for it, when there's laughter in the kitchen, when someone decides to try something unnecessary simply because it feels alive. We were handed a very serious script for how to build things in this world. And yet some of the most satisfying results seem to appear when you follow what feels alive instead. Success has a strange habit of showing up when you let yourself enjoy the game a little more than the rule book. Try approaching your life and work with a little more joy than you were told was appropriate, and just see what happens. Thanks for tuning in to the Inspiritude Effect. If this sparked something in you and you'd like to come hang out for more inspiring conversations, hit follow and share it with someone who would benefit from walking their own inspired path. In the show notes of each episode, you'll find links to aligned resources and content that will keep you moving toward your best life. And remember, the whisper is never random. Let it lead. You belong where it's taken you.